A home run to start the ball game on a 2-0 pitch. Got another run driven in by Riley. Second penalty in the second, and then the 2-run shot by Adam Duvall. Takes the starter comeback. In the seventh, Braves up by 4. Back after this.
Testing, 1, 2, testing. Hello.
Hi there, Harold. How are you? This is the Langapunim. Hi, Lazar.
How are you, Bernie? How was your day?
Yeah.
Good. We barely had a minion today. We had to call Eric in to make the minion. Oh, well. That's the way it is.
All right. He at least let you drive into the driveway?
Yeah.
All right.
I can't understand how they do those things.
Where is the Rebbe?
Hello. Hello.
We hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. But I don't hear with the things. 1 second.
Dr. Pepper or Canada?
Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Shalom Aleichem. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Yes, we do.
Very good. That one. Okay, we are on page. No, we're on page 45. Women in Netilat Yadaim. Last week we talked about the Netilat Yadayim Baboker, that Machlokas Rosh and the Rashba, in terms of whether you should do it, you make the bracha right away. That's the Rashba Shita, because you're like a new person, while the Rosh holds it's part of Tefillah, So it's preferable to be Mesader, the bracha of Netilas Yadayim, with the other brachas of Asher Yot, the other brachas that are said when you're in shul. We talked about Ruach Ra and about people who put the bowl right next to their bed. We have leniencies where your whole house is considered Daled Amis. Remember, with the Zohar was very strict about not going Daled Amis, and there was one shita that said that your whole house is like Daled Amis. So for those who walk directly to the bathroom, Daled Amis, it's not an issue. Now, women are required to perform the Netilas Yadayim like men, which is brought by the Mishnah Berurah, since the concerns of Ruach Ra are relevant to them. Ruach Ra doesn't just afflict men when they, Yadaim Askonios saying, and they go to, areas that are not clean. Women have the same areas. The same kind of washing, first on the right hand, then on the left hand, and you do it 3 times. When they prepare food, we don't want their hands, which has this ruach ra tuma on them, to touch the food. Children should also be taught to do Netilas Yadayim because of ruach ra, and if they don't do Netilas Yadayim, they're going to be touching food with their unclean hands. So even children. The Yalkut Yosef adds a few more details regarding women. This includes the fact that women also recite a bracha after drying their hands. Again, depending on the various opinions between the Rosh and the Rashba when they do it. Now, women don't go to shul,
Amen.
but it's going to be Snei Machlokas. According to the Rashba, the women should dry their hands and make the bracha right away. According to the Rosh, later on in the morning, we'll see women are chayiv in Birchas HaShachar, that at some point in the morning where they say Birchas HaShachar, they would say the Netilas Yadayim.
Do women have to wash their hand when they are nursing the baby in the middle of the night?
Absolutely. David, fantastic question. We're going to see that the Penina Halacha. We're going to learn that Halacha right now.
Okay.
Begam Noshem Avarchos Koidem Aniguv al Netilas Yadayim. They recite the bracha prior to drying their hands. V'im lo birchu koidem aniguv. If they did make the bracha before, yichol l'safar brachazu im kol birchas hashachar. So if they forgot, because you're supposed to make the bracha before you dry your hands. If they recognized that they dried their hands already and they hadn't made the bracha, they should wait to be masadered with the birchas hashachar later on. But they should make that bracha, the brachas, as soon as they can near the washing. Now, when taking care of children in the morning, a woman should make sure to wash Netilas Yadayim first. The reason is that she may not touch the parts of their body that she may not touch herself, like the mouth and the nose, as discussed earlier. We said last week that you shouldn't touch your eyes and your nose. We said, Yad la'ayin tiktzar, Yad la'af tiktzar, Yad la'oizen tiktzar. So you're going to touch your children's nose and eyes. So you don't want to do that with the Ruach Ra. So before the woman takes care of the children, she should wash her hands. Now, Rav Eliezer Melamed, the noted Israeli posek in Penina Halacha, asked whether, like David asked, should one wash the Netilas Yadayim when waking up in the middle of the night to care for children? Let's say they want to cover their children with a blanket. Ola says motzitz b'piv, or to give them a pacifier. Einam chayavim litur yadayim lifneichen. That they don't have to wash their hands for. B'nei should be kisui atinok, covering the child with a blanket. O benetinas motzitz lefiv ein tzorach sheyagiu b'yadayim b'piv. You don't necessarily touch their mouth. You can put the pacifier in their mouth without touching their mouth. Or other openings in their body. But if you're going to prepare the food, the bottle to feed the child, or to change the diaper, Well, there you're going to touch an orifice. Rotzu she'itlas yadayim l'sneichen. They should wash their hands before they do those things. Kedei shlo yiga b'macholim u'be'echad mefatchei gufo b'yadayim lo notzulos. Otherwise, they're going to touch food or one of the openings of the body without netilas yadayim. Or, like David said, "V'chenisha shemitzayros be'emtza layla l'hanikas." No, she wants to nurse her child. Ratzui shetitol yadayim l'fneichen. They should do netilas yadayim as well. If it's hard for her to do that, risha'it lismoch al deota makilim, she can rely on the lenient opinions. She'enam mechayvim netila lekamim be'emtza layla. Right? There are opinions that it's only when you wake up in the morning that you have to do netilas yadayim. But if you wake up in the middle of the night, right? That's what we talked about last week before dawn. Right? If in the middle of the night, there's no chiyuv netila. If she does do netilas yadayim at night, there's no bracha. The bracha was misakin by Chachamim only the morning one. Like that's like the Rosh, because it's part of the Hachana for Tefillah for the Krasayom HaChadash, or according to the Rashba that you're a new person, and that's why you do it with the bracha at that point. They close with a machshava concept. The Midrash on Tehillim explains the following pasuk. Explains it in a manner that is reminiscent of Moda Ani. So in Tehillim it says, "Biyadcha afkid ruchi." In your hand I place my spirit. The Midrash Tehillim says, "Benoik sheba'olam adam afkidin etzlo pigdonos." Person's going to go to China. He leaves a deposit with his neighbor. Let's say it's a cup of sugar, right? So the neighbor can use the cup of sugar and replace it with another cup of sugar and hala v'hala. Aval Kodesh Baruch Hu okay. El Hashem el Emet. He's a truthful God. Did anybody ever wake up in the morning and a different soul had been given to him? Hashem gives everybody back their own soul. By human beings, somebody gives him something to watch. It stays by him for a time. It wears out. It rusts, becomes old. We give him our neshama at night when it's tired and it's run out. However, he cleans our neshama and it's fresh in the morning. You do it every morning, even though we're in Golus, and the Yadaim just like you're faithful to return on neshama to us, we believe that you're going to be faithful to redeem us as well from Golus. So this midrash, like Modani, reminds us that we must be grateful every morning for the fact that Hashem returns our souls brand new. In addition, this can serve as a testament to the fact that Hashem will ultimately redeem us from exile at the right time. That these ideas should give us inspiration every morning to recite Moda'ani with much joy and gratefulness. Okay, let's go to page 61. We wash our hands with Netilas Yadayim, not just in the morning, but there are many occasions that require Netilas Yadayim, and I'm not talking about yet Netilas Yadayim for Su'uda. That's going to come later. This is going to be Netilas Yadayim for either cleanliness issues or Ruach Ra issues.
Ernie, didn't you teach last week that the opinion of the Gro is that there is no more Ruach Ra?
Yeah.
That's according to Rav Nebenzahl?
Right, but there are people who are still concerned about it by the Zohar. So remember, the Gro said that after the Graf Pototsky was killed, the Ruach Ra went away. That was according to the Rav Nebenzahl brought that. But we are concerned of the Ruach Ra, according to other opinions, particularly the Zohar. So, in Shir 1, we discussed halachic sources concerning the requirement for Netilat Yadayim in the morning. Now, as we learn the Tzurba, they're going to talk about washing hands, which is going to be related to getting rid of Ruach Ra or just clean. And they're going to use the word Netilat Yadayim when you're preparing for tefillah or you're going to be eating a meal. So we saw that one of the reasons for washing hands when awakening in the morning was due to Ruach Ra. There are other cases discussed in the halachic sources when one must also wash hands due to concern for Ruach Ra. In addition, the sources mention cases of washing hands for purposes of cleanliness. Below are some examples where one must wash hands that belong to the categories of either Ruach Ra or cleanliness. So waking in the morning is the one we know. Exiting a restroom, even without having relieved oneself. Exiting a bathhouse. Bloodletting, donating blood, cutting one's nails, cutting hair or shaving, contact with a dead body, and walking among dead bodies or visiting a cemetery. All of those activities will produce Ruach Ra in your hands, and you need to do an Netilat Yadayim to remove it.
Yeah, Ernie, how about surgery?
Well, surgery, we wash our hands not with a kli.
But so you okay.
You do wash your hands for cleanliness purposes,
Uh-huh.
but that doesn't have there's no Ruach Ra there.
No Ruach Ra when you do surgery on someone?
Why would you think? The only
You're
time
entering the body. I mean, urology, I'm not specifically you, but I'm just thinking.
No, the body is not a dead body.
Right. Okay.
The only thing I would say where Harold may
Bloodletting.
an orthopedic surgeon
Yeah.
does an amputation of a limb. So an aver has
Oh.
has a tumah, has to be
Uh-huh.
buried.
Interesting.
So
So
would it be
that if you come in contact with that, there you might want to wash your hands. That's a good point.
So
Now,
it would be
have
it would
to
be a
see-
problem.
No, Elazar said bloodletting.
Yeah.
Let's see whether that has a connection to doing some kind of surgical procedure on somebody else. Remember, here bloodletting, we're talking about the person himself is having his blood let, like he donates blood. So there's a little bit of misa going on. I think that's going to be what they'll talk about.
And in all these cases, you need to do 6 times?
Yes, because that's how Ruach Ra comes off. Like in the morning. Think about it. We do sirugin. So for example, Netilat Yadayim for eating, you don't have to do 6 times. You just have to, that there's no Indian of, because that's not being done for Ruach Ra. David brings up a very good point. But these things will require sirugin because the 3 sirugin is how you get rid of Ruach Ra. In fact, the Gross says you do it 4 times because the 3rd time you still have water that's contaminated. So he says the 4th time. So that, remember, Bernie asked the question tonight. Well, the Gross says there's no. The Gross himself gave us that halacha that you have to do it 4 times. Well, if he doesn't hold the Ruach Ra, what is that all about? So that was just a statement of Rav Nevensal, who heard it from his Rebbe. So you can rely, if somebody can rely on that, right? The Yalkut Yosef used that as a makel as well.
Yeah, but when you during the day, you're not always in a place where you can use a cup.
No, but that
to
was
wash
the
your
Bach.
hands.
No, remember, the Bach had said that you're chayiv misa if you walk 4 amas without netila. So the Rav Nevensal says that stringency is not necessary because you can rely on the Gra that maybe there's less concern for the Ruach Ra. So you don't have to be concerned about the Daled Amas, that you have to have the shissel right next to your bed. You can walk to the thing. It doesn't say that you shouldn't wash your hands to get rid of the Ruach Ra. It says you don't have to be makpid about the Daled Amas and Chayiv Misa because the Ruach Ra has been weakened.
But during the day when you use the restroom, during the day you're not home. There's not always have a cup available to wash your hands. After you use the bathroom,
You don't always have a cup available when you're at a cemetery.
They have a cup outside.
But what if I've been to cemeteries where there's no cup? So you got to find, when the next time you get to a place, there's a cup, you wash your hands.
Ah,
Now let's see. Dirt and cleanliness. We're going to go through each and every one of these. This is just a summary statement as to what activities during the day might you need Netilas Yadayim for. And then we're going to go into each one of these in detail. So what about dirt and if you remove your shoes, if you touch your legs, scrubbing your head, if you touch a louse, if you touch covered parts of the body, you need a Netilas Yadayim. We learned some of the details. How do you do it, and how do you do it, etc. The Chazon Ish, Rav Avram Yishai Karelitz, notes that careful attention to cleanliness of the body and the hands is a basic prerequisite for spiritual holiness. In the Kovetz Igros the Chazon Ish, Avas Tahara, Vanikius, people who love purity and cleanliness, Asher Hutba Nefesh. The nefesh is something that's holy. Your soul is upset by tumah. The 5 physical senses are affected by that. This is one of the major foundations of the Torah. The nefesh cannot attach itself to intellect. The nefesh has to be calm and unaffected by tumah. Amru taharim avilidei kedusha. In Mesilas Yesharim, it goes through the mission of the Rav Pinchas ben Yair. How do you get to Ruach HaKodesh? Part of that process, it says tahara brings to kedusha, and it says in brachos v'sem kedushim elu mayim achronim. Mayim achronim is water that's used to after you, right before you bench, to wash the salt off. But it's the concept that mayim leads to kedusha. V'inyan machanecha kadosh, the chovata nekiyut, right? There's a whole how you have to have the bathroom. Your tzoa has to be buried, right? Chovas nekiyus is cleanliness. Nam nam re'im. Holiness and cleanliness are neighbors. Each one has its own domain, cleanliness versus holiness. The hikon kolel et shneim. The concept of having hachana, for example, people are makbid to be mechin prior to davening. They put on a jacket, they put on a hat, they do Netilas Yadayim. There's a process of hachana prior to tefillah. The Chazon Ish says further, kein tzrichin latet lev lizaher mimafsidin tiviim. Destructive forces in nature. You should not be lenient that regarding the things that the Shulchan Aruch tells you to do Netilas Yadayim for. And the Shulchan Aruch himself was very machmir. When you wash your hands, there should be no separation between your skin and the water. You should certainly, it should be beyond the knuckles. These are some of the things you should focus on. Says the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Dalet, Hakam mehamita, getting up from bed. That's the normal waking up Netilah. Leaving the bathroom, or the bathhouse. If you after you cut your nails, you should wash your hands. If you take off your shoes. If you touch your legs. You scratch your head. If you're in a cemetery, somebody touches a mace. Somebody has lice in their clothing and they're delousing their clothing and they touch a louse. Hamishamish mitaso, after relations. Anogea bekina, you touch the louse. Vanogea begufo biyado, you touch your body with your hand. In all these cases, the Shulchan Aruch says you need the Netilas Yadayim. Now, we're going to study all of these, presented in descending order, from the most machmir to the most mekel, beginning with those related to Orach, and those that relate to hygiene and cleanliness. Obviously, the ones related to Ruach Ra are going to be more machmir. Washing one's hands after participating in a funeral or visiting a cemetery is a well-known example of Ruach Ra, other than we all know when we wake up in the morning, we have Ruach Ra. The basis for the notion of a Ruach Ra in a cemetery in the form of a spirit of impurity is found in Gemara Sanhedrin, which states that a spirit of impurity rests upon someone who enters the cemetery and remains there for a time. Somebody doesn't eat and drink, so he's starving, and he goes and he sleeps in the cemetery. This is some kind of, like, I guess a witch would do this, or a warlock, or somebody who wanted to practice Ruach.
By the way,
I'm
the
sure
the Nevadikas used to do that.
The who?
Nevadic.
I don't know, because this is considered to be a bad thing.
I'm just telling you, they used to do that to do tshuva. They used to go and sleep in a cemetery. That was one of the things of the Nevadic.
Okay, the Mordechai derives from this Gemara that if a person enters the cemetery, participates in a funeral, he or she must wash his or her hands upon exiting in order to remove the impure spirit. He includes such a person among several others who are required to wash hands. The Mordechai says, "Ve'elu shiva trichin netila achreim," and he says, "Aholech ben amesim." And that ruling of the Mordechai was accepted by the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah. Adds in explanation that evil spirits accompany those who return from the cemetery. The Yalkut Yosef explores the halach in more detail. The Yalkut Yosef Yotzei mi beis hakvaros v'chen achoyzer malavaya. Somebody leaves a cemetery or comes back from a funeral. Tzorach litol yadav has to wash his hands. U'mikar adin ein tzorach litol b'kli. So the Yalkut Yosef says here you don't need to use a kli. If you do it with a kli, you get a bracha. So if you leave the cemetery and there's no kli, there's just a faucet, you can wash your hands with the faucet. You should dry your hands with a towel. There's a custom that people do not dry their hands, so they won't have a hesach hadas from remembering the mace. I guess as long as your hands are wet, you'll remember the mace. If you stay 4 amas away from the coffin, and or you don't enter the cemetery, then there's no requirement to wash your hands. Although there's a meaning to be machmer no matter what. Some people wash their hands before they go in the cemetery. But Medina, you don't have to do that. This Shir in source 17 and Shir 1, we wrote that ideally both the Shulchan Aruch and Ramos say you should use a utensil when washing hands to Ruach Ra, but it's not absolutely required. The Yalkut Yosef continues, "Hanichnas lekvoros tzadikim." You go to visit Rabbi Melech Melizhensk, right? I've been there twice. Shelo b'toch beis hakvaros. There's a little house there. It's not a cemetery. His kever is there. Not far from there's Yaroslav. There's a kever of Reb Shimon Yaroslav, or one of my ancestors, was built at Tziyun over his kever. It's not in a cemetery. So anichlas lekvoros tzadikim shelo b'toch beis hakvaros, k'mo kever Reb Shimon Bar Yochai b'Meiron, the kever Yonasan ben Uziel b'Muka, the kever Rab Meir Balanes b'Tveria, the kever Shimon HaTzadik v'chadam ein tzarich litol yoda b'tzeisu misham. Tzadikim don't give off tumah. Uv'shas rachitza b'chazor malavaya. If you go to a funeral, you come back. No agul ha'akpid shelo likach hakli miyad ha'rochetz. You don't take the kli from another person who's using it. That person should put it down, and then you should take it from there. It's like people on Simchas Torah are makpid not to give the Sefer Torah away until somebody comes. You know, it's a little different, but someone comes to take it from you. You should wash your hands before you enter your house. I feel the basement of your own house. Ad sheyital yadav. But let's say you have a courtyard before your house, and you have no one to bring water to you. Then there's no mak. You don't have to be makbid. You should not wash your hands using a faucet belonging to another person. Like maybe your neighbor. The Mishnah Berurah cites the Ramah that the custom is to wash hands before entering the house of another person after returning from the cemetery. The Kaf Chaim writes that it is customary to wash hands even before entering one's own home. This, in fact, is the common custom today, as brought by the Yalkut Yosef, that all who return from the cemetery wash their hands before entering any building. The Yalkut Yosef explains in the footnotes there that even though most people do not mind if someone uses their faucet to wash their hands briefly, if many people do so, it may cause them a financial loss. Therefore, they have to receive permission. This ruling applies only in countries or regions where residents pay a significant amount for their water usage, such as in Israel or desert regions. In regions where one does not pay a large monthly amount for water consumption, this ruling may not apply. I think it probably applies in Los Angeles. This is water. Water is very expensive. What about exiting the bathroom and the bathhouse? The Shulchan Aruch lists exiting a restroom as one of the cases where hand washing is required. This is based on the Gemara in Sukkah, which states that when Rava exited the Beis HaKisei, he washed hands before donning tefillin and reciting the bracha. Chazine leila Rava, we cite Rava, the komagdim v'ka'ayla Beis HaKisei, that he would wake up early, go into the bathroom, then v'nafik, he would walk out of the bathroom, umar sheyad, he wash his hands, umar tefillin, mavarich. Gemara Brachos distinguishes between the halachic status of different types of washrooms. If the latrine is constructed in such a way that the refuse automatically passes to another space and does not remain in the washroom, then the room housing this latrine does not assume the status of a formal Beis HaKisei, which we will see impacts upon whether one may recite brachos there. The Gemara refers to this type of space as a Beis HaKisei de Parsoi, a Persian washroom. Meaning the Persians, I guess, created the first sewage system where the waste would be washed away and would not stay in the building. Even though there is feces there, they're sealed. They're constructed on an incline so that the feces roll out of the bathroom underground, like in our case where the water washes it away. So as mentioned above, the Shulchan Aruch adopts the ruling that a person is required to wash hands upon exiting the restroom. The Shulchan Aruch also acknowledges that a Persian restroom does not have the full status of a Beis HaKisei, which allows for leniencies regarding the recitation of Kriyas Shema and other brachos there, as well as contemplating Torah thoughts there. Beis HaKisei shu b'chafira, if it's a slanted trench, upiv barachak dadamas ben aguma, and it's 4 amos away from where the feces ends up. It's slanted. The feces rolls away immediately. To go, so it's distant. And the urine also travels out to the ditch. It's kasasum dami. That's considered like it's closed. Umuter likrospo. You can read Shema there. There's no bad smell. And people do not urinate outside the pit. Says the Ramah, if sometimes people will urinate outside the pit, then you would not. So the Shulchan Aruch does not discuss if the reason to wash your hands after leaving a Beis HaKisei is a function of the Ruach Ra or a function of cleanliness, hygiene. The Mishnah Berurah explains that this washing is necessitated by the Ruach Ra that rests there. Accordingly, one must wash if he just walked into the bathroom, even if he did not relieve himself. And the parallel case of a bathhouse, one must wash hands even without having bathed at the bathhouse. Even if he didn't go to the bathroom. Or from a bathhouse, so So in light of these considerations, it's necessary to clarify the status of our modern restrooms. In these facilities, refuse washes away almost immediately, and the room is kept clean of waste. Are they more compatible halachically to the Beis HaKisei or to the Persian Beis HaKisei? The answer to the central question impacts upon the following questions. Do we see the restroom as having ruach ra, such that one would be required to wash hands when passing in and out of the room, even for purposes other than relieving oneself, like the Mishnah Berurah? May one wash Netilat Yadayim for a meal at the sink in a restroom? And what is the status of a room that houses both a toilet and a bath or shower? So the Pischei Tshuva in Orach Chaim Dalet gives us some of these answers. Well, the in Beis Kisos Dizmanenu are bathhouses. Shotzas nishteves miyad im zer mamayim, that the tzor goes out with the water. Dano achroinim im dinam kebeis hakisei de parsoi, she'ein sholet sham ruach ra. A Persian bathhouse did not have ruach ra. So are our bathrooms considered like a Persian bathroom? And therefore, if you walked into such a bathroom, you'd not be chayv netilas yadayim. Umaskonas halacha b'zer lahachmir. The maskon is to be machmir. Kivan sha'atzon nisher sham zman ma. The feces stayed there a little bit. We got matzui lichluch shultzos. There's sometimes dirt of the feces. Umei raglaim. Ve'acheder miyuad umiyuchad lasot tzrachim ushmo alav. And it's a bathroom. It's singled out for a place that you relieve yourself. So that's its identity. V'im yesham od yu'udim. But for example, if there's other functions there's a bathtub, there's a shower. Let's say there's a sink to wash your hands. Uponim. There's a shower or bath in the place where the toilet is. Yesham aron achsin trufos v'kayotzebeh. There are cabinets that have medicine cabinet. Cheder kvisa, or laundry room attached. L'chenim asui kamavar likanes lecheder kvisa, or it's a passageway to the laundry room. Hanoeg shalolitol yodav kishenichtas l'sham l'lo asiyas hanoeg shalolitol yodav kishenichtas l'sham. The minig is so if people are not have a minig to wash hands when passing through the room, l'lo asiyas tzrachim yesh lo milisvach, you can rely on that. Although he says people are machmir to do the Netilas Yadayim, no matter what, if you ever walk into the bathroom, you'll be blessed. If you have no other place to do Netilas Yadayim, if you have no other place to wash your hands, you can do Netilas Yadayim to remove ruach ra there, or the formal Netilas Yadayim before eating. Like we mostly do. We go into our bathrooms to do Netilas Yadayim in the morning, which is to remove the ruach ra. And we've all been to restaurants that have the Netilas Yadayim sink in a bathroom. Well, that's based on this. Avalo yivarech sham. Your bracha you shouldn't say inside there. V'lachatchila yotza misham kshedav adayin retuvos ksheyados adayin retuvos v'inagvim b'chutz. You should go leave the lechatchila, try to leave the bathroom where you wash your hands, and then while your hands are still wet, you should dry them. V'im yuchal hotzi hamayim lachutz litol sham shaper tfei. If you can remove the water altogether and wash your hands outside, it's better to do that. V'dak ki yesh efsharut lechatchila litol yadayim b'kior shebebeis kisei im yaseh vilon ben beis hakisei lekior. You could lechatchila wash hands at the sink in the bathroom if there's a curtain between the toilet and the sink, or other partition. As long as the wind doesn't blow it. Or if there's just a Tzurba Pesach, which is not a full door, just the door frame, that could be sufficient in order to do the Netilas Yadayim in the bathroom itself. According to Piskei Tshuvos, modern washrooms do have the halachic status of a beis hakisei if they also serve an additional function. Now, they serve as, they are a beis hakisei. If they serve an additional function, there's a basis to be lenient not to wash hands after exiting, as well as to allow Netilat Yadayim there when necessary if there are other functions there. Any comments, questions?
Yeah, you could put the toilet seat down, and then it's two things. It's not it's not there anymore. It's gone away down, and you put the toilet seat down. So really, there's nothing that's tome in there anymore when you go wash your hands in the sink, because it's not connected to the toilet. You have the toilet seats down, and the soa is gone. So maybe that's that's like a door. It's like a door if you have the toilet seat down.
Well, they didn't. It says they say you need a curtain or a Tzuras HaPesach. Some people have a Tzuras HaPesach, right? They've built their toilet in like a cubby. That's a Tzuras HaPesach. That's what he's referring to. That separates it into a different space. I don't think putting the toilet seat down is enough, unless you have. If please show us that someone has said that works, but they're certainly not saying that here. Okay. What about cutting nails? I mean, when I was a kid, my grandmother would always cut my nails, and she would always bavorn us to do Netilat Yadayim. We mentioned earlier that cutting nails is another instance where Ruach Ra is present that warrants washing one's hands. The Gemara Pesachim teaches that one should wash one's hands after cutting one's nails. One who fails to do so is destined to experience an inexplicable fear due to the Ruach Ra. The Shakal Turfa V'lo Masha Yadeh, somebody who cuts his nails doesn't wash his hands. Mafchid Chad Yuma, he's going to have a fright. V'lo Yada Maika Mafchid, one of those cases where you don't know what made you afraid. The Shulchan Aruch brings us as halacha, codifies washing hands after cutting nails as obligatory. He brings the line of the Gemara that you will be fearful of something. The Achronim discuss the implications of this law. Must the person also wash hands if he or she severs only one or some nails, as opposed to all your nails? If you bite your nails, is that the same as cutting with scissors? May a person participate in the tefillah while he has been habitually cutting or biting his nails? The Pischei Teshuva addresses many of these questions and writes that one should be stringent about them, but some authorities defend the practice of those who are lenient. Whether it's your hands or your feet, you use a clipper or scissors, or you do it with your finger or your teeth. Even you removed one nail. You have to wash both hands until the wrists. Again, we're back to what David Hager asked. You have to do it in a regular 3-time way, and yes, you do. All the Ruach Ra removals are always 3 times. Lechatchila, you should do it 3 times. But Mihikradin, if you did one hand each time, the whole hand, that would be sufficient. See the Kaf HaChaim, the Pischei Teshuva, who discussed whether one must wash hands 3 times in all the cases of Ruach Ra, or washing once suffices, except for when waking in the morning, when all agree that 3 times is necessary. So you see, there's probably reason to be lenient if you only did it once, based on this. Back to the Pischei Teshuva. There are some support those or excuse those who don't wash their hands after cutting their nail with their teeth. Or somebody just chews their nails out of a bad habit, not because they want to take off their fingernails. They're just nervous. if another person cuts another person's nails, hanoitel ein tzarich litol yodav. The one who did the cutting doesn't have to wash his hands, even though he touched the nails. Afilu noga. Vanitel chayv netilas yadayim kedin. But the person who had his nails cut, he has to go wash his hands. So it's a function of having your nails cut that causes the Ruach Ra to come on you. The Yalkut Yosef clarifies that the chiyuv to wash one's hands after cutting one's nails does not impede responding to a bracha or the like before they are washed. Hashomei bracha or kaddish be'eshinot el sipornav. Somebody heard a bracha or kaddish while he's cutting his nails. Ona amen. Achra bracha kaddish ve'en lachmer b'zeh. You don't have to be machmir not to answer. Given sharuach Rosh Hashanah Yadaim be'eshinot el sipornav ruach Ra klusha, because it's very minor after nail cutting, the ruach Ra that's there. The Mishnah verse says one may daven or study Torah. Many of the cases mentioned in Shulchan Orach of ruach Ra, provided one ensures that his hands are clean. Nevertheless, the ruach Ra is only removed after one washes hands with water. What about touching concealed parts of the body? We have discussed the need for washing hands associated with ruach Ra. The remaining washing hands is for hygienic purposes. According to citing the ruling of Rav Yitzchak Abuav, the Beis Yosef relates that a person must wash hands after touching concealed parts of the body. Rabbeinu Agadol Mari Avuvav Katvam b'Simin Zayin b'Shem Orchas Chaim Voice Valem Yeshoim Mafanogeh B'Kina, that if you touch a louse, the Yeshoim Mafanogeh B'Gufa B'Yoder, if you touch your body in a concealed area, because the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah indicate that the case of touching one's body refers to touching the concealed areas of the body. The Mishnah Berurah mentions this halach as well in Hilchos Yom Kippur when discussing instances where one may wash the body on Yom Kippur, which is normally forbidden. He explains the reason is being based on the perspiration often found in covered areas. Ayin b'derech hachayim, du adinim noga begufo b'mekomis hamechusim. If you touch your body in hidden places, sheshamu makom zeya, where you sweat, afilu lo noga rak be'etz b'achas, if you only touch that place with one finger. Tzarich lirchotz kol yodav ad kishrei explosive. You have to wash your hands until the knuckles. Nowadays, many people are more careful about cleanliness in general. If so, does the rule of washing hands after touching concealed parts of the body still apply? According to Yalkut Yosef, the halacha does not change, and one should still wash one's hands. The Yalkut Yosef discusses a few other questions about washing hands due to cleanliness. In Noga b'yado achas b'davar amatzrach netilas yadayim, he says you only have to wash that hand. You touched your armpit with one hand, you don't have to wash that hand. You should not touch your thigh or your calf, other covered places. Or you shouldn't scratch your head when you're davening or learning, or during eating. These are places with sweat, and therefore it's not hygienic. But if you touch your places that are open, the uncovered parts of the hair of the body, then that you don't have to wash your hand. Person went to get a blood test, didn't touch his upper arm. Misha termed out somebody donates blood. Does not require netilas yadayim. I'm reading the footnote. Rav Yosef explains, based on Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, citing the Nishmas Avram, that the halach only requires washing hands after taking blood in a manner that was considered at the time to be medically therapeutic. For example, the Mishnah Berurah talks about using bloodletting using a leech. In contrast, when donating blood or undergoing a blood test, the bloodletting itself is not considered to be curing the person. Therefore, with regard to issues that are more mystical in nature, such as this, one need only be stringent in the cases mentioned by the Gemara in Shulchan Aruch. The Piskei Tshuva, citing the ruling of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach as well, would seem that one who receives a vaccine, such as for COVID-19, should also not require washing hands afterwards for the same reason. It doesn't involve taking blood, and any bleeding that results is incidental, not therapeutic. Thank you. Hanogea b'balei chaim tmeim. You touch a pig, you touch a donkey or horse, non-kosher animal, cat or a dog, k'mo chatul keler. Yeshayim shein tzarich litol es yad. Some say you don't have to wash your hands. V'tov yoter lachmer litol es yad aveicha de'efshar, but you should, better is to be machmir. V'uad hanogea b'balei chaim tohirim. If you touch a kosher animal, a cow, a goat, shetov lachmer latzrich is Yadaim. They're usually dirty. If they're clean, ain't tzarich l'tis Yadayim. The Pischei Tshuva, though, writes that one need not wash hands if one knows that his body is clean and he touches his unclean area. Nevertheless, he agrees that it is still appropriate to be machmir due to the principle of lo plug. Lo plug is the term by which the halachic literature refers to the broad, uniform application of rabbinic ordinances in all cases. The essential principle is that when the sages created a specific requirement or restriction, the halacha applies even for people or in circumstances which the specific concern might not apply. The Pischei Tshuva also discusses the definition of concealed places and how it changes based upon local custom. Person took a shower in the morning. He doesn't have any sweat, or perspiration. There's really no obligation for Netilat. You could be machmir. There's a lot of ruach ra on our feet and legs. So washing hands after touching concealing parts of the body was assumed to relate to cleanliness rather than ruach ra. Some poskim assume that ruach ra is present in this case, like on feet, and in all cases relating to uncleanliness. So that's a point of machlokes. Therefore, if even you come out of the bath or the shower and you touch your feet, you should do Netilat Yadayim. Something about feet that have ruach ra. The criterion of places that are considered concealed. Depends if it's summer or winter. If in Palm Springs people go out with their forearms and elbows uncovered, so you don't have to do Netilat Yadayim if you touch yourself there. No, there's sweat there. For example, if you have sweat on your face or forehead, there's no requirement for Netilat Yadayim. Should children be expected to observe these halachos? The Yalkut Yosef responds that they need not wash hands in the middle of Torah study. Though it seems that in principle, children should indeed observe the rules of washing hands in general. The Yalkut Yosef writes that teachers should ideally instruct children wearing shorts not to touch their legs while they are learning Torah during tefillah. Nevertheless, in places where wearing shorts is common, it would seem that based upon the Pischei Tshuva quoted above, the legs would not be considered concealed areas of the body, and washing hands would not be absolutely required. I seem to learn that the Pischei Tshuva said that Negia Reglayim is a problem because the Mukubalim say Ruach HaTumah is there no matter what. And therefore you should touch them, you should wash your hands no matter what, even if you came out of the bath or shower. Maybe it's not considered concealed there, that's why it's Ruach Ra. And therefore if you wear shorts, that would be okay, in the summer. And it's a general custom to encourage the children to follow these dinim of Netilat Yadayim. Some say it's only children who have reached the age of chinuch. What about touching your shoes? Page 75. One who removes his shoes, according to Shulchan Aruch, must wash his hands. And the same applies to touching shoes even without removing them. The Mishnah explains that the reason for this stems from considerations of cleanliness. He also adds that in all cases of washing hands for cleanliness, one need not do so immediately, as opposed to washing hands in case of ruach ra. Mishum shenogea b'yadav beis hachlitza. If he touches, he removes his shoes. But if he doesn't touch the shoes, then he doesn't require netilah. People washing your hands after taking your shoes off, or touching your feet, or scratching your head. This is not ruach ra, it's nekiyas, it's cleanliness. You don't have to run and do it. But if the reason is ruach ra, then you have to do it right away. If one wishes to daven or study Torah, one should wash his hands immediately, or at least ensure that they are clean. In where Shulchan Aruch said you have to do it for cleanliness, like shoes and scraping your hair and all of that stuff. The Yalkut Yosef cites the same halacha, including socks, slippers, and boots. Somebody who touch shoes or sandals, you have to wash your hands. Socks, if they're clean, it's only shoes that are being used to walk on the ground. There's dirt and smell. I'm sure there's ruach ra there. That's why you have to wash your hands when you touch shoes. Socks ain't derech laleches b'hem. However, usually if you're going to walk with socks, it's clean floor, which is ain't sham ruach ra. If you put on or take off your socks, as long as they're not filthy or perspiration, you don't have to wash. Or if you touch the shoelaces, you don't have to wash your hands.
And when you put them on after duchening? Ernie, not to be.
That's why Saul just asked me about duchening. I know that Kohanim are makpid to have like slip-ons. That way they don't have to touch their shoes. If you touch your shoes, you'd have to wash your hands. You have to slip them on and slip them off.
Go in without your hand, sometimes it's stuck.
I know, but that would be a reason to use a
shoehorn.
So you don't touch it. So that could be kept in a Kohen's duchening bag. Chaim Eisenberg, do you have a shoehorn in your duchening bag? In your talus bag, so you have it in shul? No.
We're loafers.
Yeah, but Saul is saying sometimes it's hard to get your foot into a loafer.
Oh, we're
Get a
slip-on.
bigger,
That's why
get a
we're
bigger
loafers.
shoe.
Your loafer.
Get a bigger shoe.
Okay, but think about it. It's not a bad idea to have a shoehorn there, and you just help it in, so you don't touch the shoe.
It's really not. It's interesting. In Chutz La'aretz, it's not such a big deal because you're putting your shoe. It's the end of davening anyway. In Eretz Yisrael, when you're duchening, in Shachar, it's Shabbos and Musaf, then it's a little bit of a challenge.
Bernie, just a second.
Yes, Bernie. I'm sorry, Bernie. Go ahead. Bernie.
Yeah, just from a practical point of view, if you're going to be machmir here, you get up in the morning, you go wash Netilat Yadaim, then you come out and you get dressed, you put your shoes and your socks on, you have to wash Netilat Yadaim again. This is what it seems to imply. Unless you can somehow just touch your laces without touching your leg.
No, Bernie. He said here, the shoe business is not ruach ra, it's cleanliness. So that's why the Mishnah Berurah said you don't have to do it immediately. So the thing to do is to come to shul and then do Netilat Yadayim right before you daven. That'll take care of all the other touchings you did, leaving the bathroom. Bathroom might be ruach ra, so you'd have to do that. Well,
Anyway, Kohanim always think they're too big for their boots anyway. That's why they don't fit in their shoes.
that's a good one. That's a good one. Let's just finish to get to haircuts. And then, so we'll leave some stuff for next week. And next week we will start Hilchos Tzitzis. We'll finish this this last piece next week, and then we'll do Hilchos Tzitzis. Somebody took off their shoes without touching them. You have to wash your hands. Or you're trying on new shoes at a shoe store. It hasn't been walked on outside. As long as he didn't touch his old shoes. New shoes is not going to be a problem. Slippers. You got to wash your hands. It's like regular shoes. That if they don't enclose the heel, but they're open from the back, you don't have to do it. It's not considered like removal of the shoe. He says, Mikra Adin is that you should wash your hand when touching slippers. But perhaps if you just removed and touched them, and if you put them on and remove them without touching them, because normally with chalitz of a shoe, you're supposed to do it. But if you didn't touch it, that's fine. If you put on boots, like they reach your knee, it's the same thing. You have to do Netilat. Pischei Tshuva discusses the proper method of washing hands after touching one's shoes. It also rules that washing hands for touching non-leather shoes, as well as shoelaces, is not required if they are not dirty. 3 times, at least until your knuckles. If you have no choice, 1 time is okay with each hand. If you touched the shoe with one hand, you don't have to wash both hands, just the hand that touched. You shouldn't just do the fingers, you should do the whole hand, is what he says. Well, the shoelaces, if there's no dirt on them, if you're not going to wash your hands when you touch the shoelaces, you have someone to rely on. With the socks, if they're sweaty, like the bottom of the sock that's stuck in the shoe. Slippers made out of rubber or felt, if it's dirty, otherwise we don't have to do it with leather shoes. Okay, we'll stop here, and we're going to learn the Daf Yomi now for those who are part of the Daf Yomi.
Chaim, good night.